Come on in Facebook. We're getting ready to start my brand new show, brand new episode of my show. It's not a new show, it's been out there a while, but new episode of my show, Jimmy Rants. We do the show over on Instagram Live, but we always let you guys peek in here on Facebook, YouTube. Really appreciate you being here. We give you some content on the regular basis. Try to do one at least every single day at 11 a.m. Eastern Time right here during the week. Hello, Jessica. Thanks for being here today, providing information on all sorts of things. Yeah, we just kind of give you a variety of topics that we talk about here. Hello, Tracy. Hello, Beth. And so, yeah, we have a fun show. Thank you guys for being here today on YouTube. Hello, Shirley. Hello, Patricia. Thank you guys for coming in on YouTube Live. We're getting ready to start my show, Jimmy Rants. What's up, David? What's up, Debbie? Got a really good one here for you today. I've been sitting on this one for a few days because I had other things to do, but there is a brand new study that's in the pipeline that's going to make a whole lot of headlines once it comes out because of the negative things it says about keto. So as a keto advocate, I have a few things to say in response to this crazy study that I think you find interesting. Hello, Mary. Hello, Nancy. Thank you guys for being here today as well. So if you guys are ready, we're going to get this show on the road. And here we go. Come on in, you guys. We got a brand new episode of Jimmy Rants in store for you here today. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, if you want to engage live in the content, you really need to go follow me right here. Instagram is where we have all the fun. I am at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you are there, engage live, just like Carnivore Canary, Keto Cord, Patiro, Kitty Lou. There's so many people coming in very fast. So thank you guys for watching here today on Jimmy Rants. We also are simulcasting on my Facebook page. So welcome to you guys, as well as here on YouTube Live. Thank you everyone for being here for today's show. If you missed the show live, you can watch it on replay for up to 24 hours over on Instagram. But after 24 hours, they do make it disappear. Pop on over JimmyRants.com. That's where we house all the past episodes of this show. We also put them up over on YouTube. Just type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. You might also be interested in knowing that on Tuesdays, which today is Tuesday, on the Livin' La Vida Low Carb show, we air some audio from Jimmy Rants as well. So I take usually kind of the best Jimmy Rants content. We usually do multiple shows. Today's episode that I'm airing is all about Butter Bob Briggs, and how he was driven away from the keto community because of what he called the toxic nature of the animosity that people were showing. And so we're airing that today on the Livin' La Vida Low Carb show, LLVLC.com, if you want to go listen. But that's how you access this show. We have a lot of fun, and we do bring you a whole lot of different kinds of content here on this show. And today I want to hit on this brand new study that it's going to hit the media here very soon. And I wanted you guys to know about it sooner than later, because when it comes out, it's going to make a huge splash in a negative way against a low-carb, high-fat ketogenic diet. And of course, we see these kind of studies come out all the time. This is not new. I've even made the theory that I think they do it on purpose. Right at about every 6 months, there is a brand new study that comes out that's shocking against the keto diet. And of course, I've been at this business for about 15 years in a row, and I have seen this almost like clockwork happen again and again and again. And with keto being in the limelight the last few years, it's been a whole lot more frequent than every 6 months. It's now about every 2 to 3 months. You're seeing this drumbeat that the ketogenic diet is not all that its proponents are saying that it is. And one thing that I've often talked about is, if we're going to get research on keto, let's make it a randomized control clinical trial. And so what that is you have actual study participants that the researchers are looking at in a lab setting and looking at over an extended period of time in order to garner whatever health results would come from it. And Good scientists always come up with a theory. So, regardless of what your preconceived notion of what should happen is, everybody's going to have their theory, everybody's going to have bias. And we pretend like researchers have zero bias at all. In a perfect world, that would be true, and you simply let the science dictate what it's going to say, what the data shows what it's going to say. Unfortunately, a lot of scientists go into doing studies with the sole purpose of, here is my theory, and now I'm going to go get the evidence that proves my theory. Not, here's my theory, and I'm going to let the science show me what it shows me. And a lot of researchers who go into a study with a theory, trying to let the data show what their theory is, whether it's true or not, they don't find it, and they never publish that data. That is irresponsible science, if you ask me. A good scientist would say, okay, here's my theory, but I don't know what it's going to tell me. And then when the data and it runs counter to that, we can say, well, we thought this was going to happen, but the conclusion is it was exactly the opposite. And of course, a lot of people, they hear, well, science says, research says, a study says, not realizing there's different qualities of study. RCTs are the major ones. Epidemiological are the ones that most scientists put out there that then get the big splash headline. But randomized control trials are very few and far between because they can be very expensive. And if they're done well, especially in the diet realm, they typically take a very long time to do. You can't just do a randomized control clinical trial of a diet study for just a few weeks and think that it shows you something. You really need to put people up in a metabolic ward for upwards of 6 to 12 months. Now, the problem is you lose a lot of people if you do that. And so that's why you don't see a lot of randomized control clinical trials of like the keto diet, for example, comparing it to, say, a low-fat diet. They've tried to kind of make this pitting of low-fat versus low-carb for a very long time. Ever since I came into this community blogging back in 2005, they have been trying to pit low-fat diets against low-carb diets, and usually the marker that they're primarily tracking is weight loss. And what they found, there's been about 43 different studies comparing low-fat versus low-carb. And at the very least, low-carb ties low-fat, and in most of the cases, low-carb far exceeds low-fat. Now, that has nothing to do with like compliance. That has nothing to do with other health markers that are impacted by those two diets. So many other interesting factors to look at when it comes to keto, low-carb kind of diets versus low-fat plant type of diets. A lot of factors to look at. But they want to focus on weight loss. I have, for the life of me, never understood why weight loss is this grand indicator in your health. Because we know weight is determined by a whole lot more things that are confounding variables than just your diet. But I digress, because I have a study right here to share with you that if you haven't heard about this yet, is probably going to be published very soon in a major medical journal, and it's going to make headlines everywhere. And I wanted you guys to get the first scoop on what this is all about. I've got the full details of the study, and the primary researcher here is this guy named Kevin Hall. So if Kevin Hall's name sounds familiar, it should. He has been a calorie hypothesis apologist for the longest time. Ever since I've been online, Kevin Hall has been out there doing these studies. He is from the National Institutes of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. He's a part of the NIH, National Institutes of Health. I have interviewed Kevin Hall on the Living La Vida Low Carb Show podcast. And he's a really nice guy. I don't want to say anything disparagingly about him personally, but he's a very biased researcher. Let me get this out there first and foremost. Kevin Hall is one of the most biased researchers at the NIH because his hypothesis is that it's all about calorie restriction when it comes to weight and health. And he thinks the low-carb diet is a big ruse, a big fad, and he makes very explicit that he doesn't believe carbohydrate restriction really means anything, and that it's all about energy expenditure versus energy input, and that if you keep energy input down and increase energy expenditure, you will lose weight and get healthy. That's his theory. And so every study he's ever done has always come to that conclusion. Now, one of the more controversial things that he did research-wise, and you can go look it up from a few years ago, about 5-6 years ago, was he took money from Gary Taubes and Dr. Peter Attia. They had this group called the Nutrition Science Initiative. It's no longer in existence. They ran out of money. But what they did was they distributed a whole lot of money to various researchers that did not believe in carbohydrate restriction, because their thinking was, let's give this research money. And they had lots of investors that gave tens of millions of dollars at a time. And they were hoping, giving these researchers that have a totally almost anti-low carb stance, giving them the money to do the research that they wanted to see, that they would come out with the conclusions that the data would show. But again, we pretend like all scientists have good intentions with research and letting the data speak for itself. And what, unfortunately, Gary Taubes and Dr. Peter Attia quickly found out was people like Kevin Hall are not interested in your theory, and they will take your money, they will do the research, they will get published under the guise of, this is a Nutrition Science Initiative research study, and it shows carbohydrate restriction's a whole lot of nothing compared to calorie restriction. And that's exactly what he did. And so with that background, let's take a look at the latest study that Kevin Hall conducted. Again, if you joined us late, we're looking at a brand new Kevin Hall study. He's one of the guys at the NIH who does a lot of research in nutrition, highly biased researcher who thinks calories hung the moon. And so if you think the calorie hypothesis is legitimate, then you're going to do research that is going to try to verify that. Not one single study that he's published to date has ever found that the calorie hypothesis is not true. Not a single one. Now, is it plausible that the data actually showed that? Sure, it is plausible. But from what I know of good researchers that are out there that are looking into carbohydrate restriction, eating ad libitum, which means as much as you want to satiety, versus one that's more of a calorie restricted type of diet that's lower in fat, low carb ketogenic wins every single time. It does. So this new Kevin Hall study attempts to discredit keto yet again with a 2-week research period. And we're going to get into that here in just a minute. But the headline of the study, a plant-based, low-fat diet decreases ad libitum energy intake. In other words, you automatically, spontaneously lower the amount of calories that you consume compared to an animal-based ketogenic diet, an inpatient randomized controlled trial. Okay? Listen to this language, because Kevin Hall knows all the complaints that has been put out there that I'm sharing here today about his research. And he thinks making it a randomized controlled trial is going to fix the problems that people have. What he does not realize is we see through his ruse, because 2 weeks, really? 2 weeks, most people aren't even keto adapted yet. A 2-week study is completely, of keto is completely incomplete. Most people, it takes somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks in order to see sustainable nutritional ketosis take place. Yeah, you can show levels of ketones that would be in the period of nutritional ketosis within 2 weeks, sure. But to get the full effects of being in a fat adapted state, you need at least 2 to 4 weeks, and in some cases of people that are insulin resistant, 4 to 8 weeks before that fat adaptation kicks in. So automatically, right off the bat, it being a 2-week study ticks me off to no end, because it doesn't really show you anything as it relates to what a real long-term ketogenic diet is all about. What we want to know is, what does it look like, not just in a couple of weeks, but many months, years, and decades? Now, obviously, you can't keep somebody locked up in a metabolic ward that long, but extrapolating out, this is what would happen just with a 2-week period. This is incredibly incredibly incomplete. It's also an uncontrolled randomized controlled trial, as well as unblinded. In other words, we have to have the people not know what they're doing, but they made very full aware of exactly what they were doing. They were purposely being tested for whether they eat more or less. And so these patients that were in this study knew that. And so if you have that knowledge about it, then how are you supposed to get accurate results? They also didn't ask the patients how they wanted to eat the foods that they had psychologically, whether, something, in other words, they did not set them up necessarily to succeed or fail in any given way. They just gave them the food and didn't because every researcher understands that you have to fit it within the plans of the individual people. Like, think about your own diet. Like, I do a keto diet that's mostly carnivorous, but there's other people that love to have a keto diet that maybe has a few more plant-based, kind of a ketotarian style. And yet it's the same diet, produces the same kind of results. And so that's a big problem. And if you look at the results that we're going to share here in a minute, you cannot have these kinds of effects over such a short period of time. It's just unfortunate that this is going to get a lot of play in the media, which is why I wanted to get this out there sooner than later. All right, let's take a look at it. The abstract says, competing models of obesity and its treatment often contrast the relative roles of dietary fat versus dietary carbohydrate. Advocates of low-carb diets posit that an intake of high glycemic carbohydrates leads to an elevated postprandial insulin, it does, thereby promoting body fat accumulation while increasing hunger and energy intake, according to this carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. Kevin Hall hates that model of obesity. He thinks it's total bunk. Alternatively, proponents of low-fat diets argue that high-fat intake promotes body fat storage because of passive overconsumption of energy resulting from this high energy density of dietary fat. Again, 9 calories for 1 gram of dietary fat versus only 4 for carbohydrate and protein. To test these competing models, 20 adults that did not have diabetes, their average age was 30, with a BMI of 27.8, were admitted as inpatients at the NIH Clinical Center. They randomized them to consume an ad libitum, means eat as much as you want, either a plant-based low-fat diet, PBLF, which was 75% carbohydrate, 10% fat, or an animal-based ketogenic low-carb diet, which was 76% fat, 10% carbohydrate, for 2 weeks, following immediately by the alternate diet for 2 weeks. So in other words, they didn't do a washout period, guys. They literally put them on this low-fat, plant-based diet for 2 weeks, measured all the things they're going to measure, which we'll see here in a minute, and immediately jumped to a low-carb, high-fat diet for the next 2 weeks. Usually in these studies, they do a washout period of at least 1 to 2 weeks of whatever effects happened with that diet. You don't want them bleeding over into the next experiment, but that's exactly what he did. He let it bleed over into the next 2 week period. Now let's look at that. 75% carbs, 10% fat. So 15% protein, it looks like, in both of these studies. So they kept protein constant, and pretty much protein stays pretty constant in most of the studies. Although I do wonder if they did a third group where they didn't go 75% protein. Nobody's eating that much protein as a percentage of calories. But I wonder if they did, say, a 35% protein with kind of a moderate carb, moderate fat intake, maybe like a zone diet type of macros, just as a control group. That would have been really fascinating if he added that in here as well. All right, so 3 daily meals plus snacks amounting to twice each subject's estimated energy requirements were provided, and subjects were instructed to eat as much or as little as desired. 3 meals and snacks. Now, people who are actually well fat adapted, you might start off eating 3 meals with snacks, but what you find over time is you automatically go down to pretty much eliminating snacking. You don't snack when you eat and you're very well fat adapted. You eliminate snacks. And for most people, they tend to only eat 1 to 2 meals a day once you go full on keto adaptation kicking in and not feeling as hungry anymore. And so the fact that they provided all this, and of course they provided it in excess because they wanted patients to be able to choose as much or as little as they wanted to eat. So the plant-based diet resulted in substantially greater glucose and insulin. In other words, predictably, the 75% fat or 75% carbohydrate diet led to an increase in their insulin and their blood sugar. We would predict that. Whereas the low carb diet led to an increase in the blood ketones of about 3 millimoles per liter to suppress appetite. Again, keep in mind, 2-week study. You can have higher levels, and in fact, when you first start keto, those ketone levels can jump pretty high pretty fast. Higher ketone levels alone does not mean you are keto adapted yet. People don't understand this. They think, okay, I get to that 0.5 threshold of nutritional ketosis pretty quick within 3 days. I'm keto adapted. No, you are not. You are in ketosis, but not keto adapted. I would say full keto adaptation takes place when you get to 1.0 on the blood meter or some equivalent meter of testing for ketones, and you stay there for 2 weeks. If you're over 1.0 and you stay there for 2 weeks on your blood ketones, then at that point your body is pretty well fat adapted and you're able to experience the benefits from nutritional ketosis. It's not just the presence of high ketones alone that gives these benefits. Now, yes, you get to a 3.0, which is what he's talking about here in your blood ketones, a very powerful appetite suppressant, but not in a 2-week study. Let's look at those same patients 2 months later and they get a 3.0. I bet your bottom dollar they're going to say that those ketones are giving them an appetite suppressant. It is. Ad libitum energy intake was 689 calories lower on the low-fat diet as compared to the low-carb diet. In other words, the low fatties all ate about 7 calories than the low-carb group. Now that's interesting because most of the studies prior to this one, I'm thinking of a very famous Jeff Volek study where they let a low-carb diet group eat ad libitum, whatever amount of calories they wanted to, but then on the low-fat end of the study, they restricted them strictly to 1,800 calories of their low-fat, mostly plant-based kind of diet. And what he found, Dr. Volek found in his study, this was probably from 10, 12 years ago, in his study, he found that the low-carb group spontaneously lowered their calories. You didn't have to force it because when you are eating satiating foods, you don't overconsume them. So why in this study did the low-carb group eat nearly 700 calories more than the low-fat group? That didn't make any sense. That runs directly counter to a lot of research that's been put out there previously. Is Kevin Hall trying to tell us that all of us who eat a ketogenic diet are stuffing our mouths with a whole bunch of fat all day, every day? He's trying to posit that theory. These data challenge the veracity of this carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. Oh, you wish, Kevin Hall. He is trying so desperately to discredit the work that so many people have looked into ketogenic diets. It's not even funny. And he's not even trying to hide his bias anymore. The bias is there. I just wish he would own up to it. And it suggests that a low-fat diet has benefits for appetite control, even if it didn't lower blood glucose and insulin. Okay, so that's the study abstract. You see where we're going here? I don't know how much of this study I want to just read. Let me see, because you know most of the kind of arguments in this introduction about the various reasons for obesity, that some people think it's an excess of carbohydrate consumption that raises insulin and blood sugar. Others think it's an overconsumption of calories, which would pack on pounds, and thus lowering fat intake would prevent body fat accumulation. That's basically what he's writing here in the introduction. So what they tried to do was to look at an animal-based ketogenic low-carb diet with 10% of energy from carbs, 75 from fat, and then compare it to a plant-based low-fat diet, 10% of energy from fat, 75% from carbohydrate. And they conducted an inpatient crossover study. Crossover meaning they do one diet and then they do the other one. Without diabetes, the 20 adults, again, they were exposed to both of the diets in random order. So 10 of them went on the plant-based one first, then the animal-based low-carb diet, and then the other ones, 10 of them on the animal-based and immediately to the plant-based. Again, not having a washout period in there is very, very suspicious to me. It is. I wonder if some of that 700 calorie difference is the people that were on the starvation, low-fat, plant-based diet first. By the time they get to this ad libitum animal-based 75% diet, they were probably starving. So what's the first thing you do? Oh, I can eat as much as I want. Oh, I am tearing into a whole lot of calories to make up for the crap diet that I had the previous 2 weeks. That sounds funny, but it's probably true. They were starving. So by the time they get to the animal-based food diet, they're like, yeah, give me all the steak. Give me all the fat because I need it because I'm starving on this low-fat diet. Don't think that that didn't come into play in this study. The first primary outcome compared the mean energy intake, amount of calories consumed, but each 2-week diet period. The second primary outcome compared the mean energy intake on the second week of each diet period to allow for physiological adaptations to the diets and dissipation of any carryover effects. So he's trying to CYA and say, well, we're primarily looking at the totality of the energy intake, but we're really in as a secondary intake, looking at the second week because we don't want any bleed over. Try to rationalize it all you want, Kevin Hall, but you're not fooling me. You're just not. So they had 11 males and 9 females, weight stable, and so they got put into this metabolic clinical research unit at the NIH Clinical Center. They resided there for 28 days in a row. So again, they did 2 back-to-back 14-day as part of this study. Subjects were randomly assigned to either of the diets for 2 weeks and immediately went to the other diet. Subjects were not informed of the primary aims of the study, but they were told that the purpose of the study was to learn about how diets varying in carbs and fat affect the body. Well, why would you even tell them that? Because if you're studying the varying effects of carbs and fat, and let's not pretend like people don't come into these studies without some preconceived notions as well. What if you got somebody that believes low-fat calorie restriction is everything? What if they purposely ate less on the plant-based low-fat diet? And what if they purposely ate more on the other one to skew the results? I mean, again, there's so many factors when you look at nutritional health research that can go into this. Let's not pretend like these things don't happen. The subjects were told that this was not a weight loss study and that they should not be trying to change their weight in any way. They wore loose fit clothing throughout the study. Now that's funny. So we always talk about like the stretchy pants. So they wore very loose fit clothing so they couldn't tell if they were gaining or losing weight. And they were blinded to daily weight, ketone, and continuous glucose measurements. So they have a CGM on their arm measuring how much, what their glucose is all throughout the day. So during each of the diet phase parts, the subjects were presented with 3 daily meals at standard times and a continuous supply of snacks and bottled water. Daily food and beverages were provided at twice each subject's energy requirements, and subjects were instructed to consume as much or as little as they wanted. Up to 60 minutes were allotted to consume each meal. So in other words, they put food in front of them and they get 60 minutes. That's double the amount of what they would normally eat. And they put the food in front of them and they give them 1 hour. Go. And they can eat as much or as little as they want. If I was a study participant, I would really screw these people up. A 2-week study, I would fast. Of course, I'm snarky like that too. Menus rotated on a 7-day schedule, and the meals were designed to be well matched across diets for total energy, protein, and non-starchy vegetables. The diets offered varied widely in energy density, the percentage of energy derived from carbohydrate versus fat, as we talked about earlier. So the low carb meals derived 82% of energy from animal foods, so it's a very carnivorous diet, whereas the low fat meals contained only plant-based products. So let's see what else they have here that would be of interest. Okay, so they were talking about like how pleasant was the food. They were kind of getting some subjective measures, just seeing how they liked the foods they were being given. All right, so body weight and body composition. So body weight decreased during both of the diets. Remember, that was not an aim of this study. They just wanted to see what would happen. Obviously, if you go on a very low-fat diet or a very low-carbohydrate diet, you should lose weight. So both did lose weight. The low-carb diet resulted in a rapid weight loss during the first week and total weight loss after 2 weeks. On average, lost 1.77 kilos, which if I'm doing the math right, that's somewhere around 7 pounds. Around 7 pounds. The low-fat diet led to slower initial weight loss. So when they first started on that 75% carbohydrate diet, they didn't lose much weight at the beginning. But after 2 weeks, weight loss amounted to 1.09 kilos, which was somewhere around 2.5 pounds, which was not significantly different. Well, if you do a 2-week study and one group loses 7 pounds, the other one loses about 2 pounds, that doesn't seem significant because you didn't go long enough. What if they'd gone 6 months? Do you know the stark difference in weight loss between the low-carb group and the low-fat group? Would have been incredible. Like we're talking 60, 70 pound difference in weight loss. So it's not statistically different. What do you expect in a 2-week study? Most of the weight changes from the low carb group were due to changes in free fat mass measured by dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, whereas the low fat diet did not result in a significant change in free fat mass. So they're trying to say most of the weight loss with the low carb group had nothing to do with losing body fat. It must have been water weight. Well, no freaking kidding. When you go on a low carb diet, the very first thing that happens is you're shifting your body over metabolically from being a fat burner. So what does that do? That physically releases the glycogen stores in your muscle. And what are also in your muscle? It's water. So when it dumps that glycogen, it's dumping water into your body and thus peeing it out and thus pooping it out and all the other ways water gets out of your body, and you lose a lot more weight. So he's trying to diminish that this weight loss effect even means anything because, oh, it was just water weight. From a fat mass standpoint, it really was nothing. It was insignificant. Okay, Kevin Hall, you can have that argument if you'd like. But the fact is, people do lose weight in that way at the beginning on a low-carb diet. Whereas that 75% carb diet, you're refilling all their glycogen stores. So, of course, they're not going to lose that as part of their fat loss or weight loss. While there was no statistically significant difference in the final amount of body fat lost at the end of the diet periods, the difference in the average rate of body fat loss between the diets had the low-fat diet group losing more body fat loss versus the low-carb diet. Okay, ticky-tack, ticky-tack, ticky-tack. And again, in a 2-week study, why do we care what weight loss was over 2 weeks? We don't. Continuous glucose monitoring and beta hydroxybutyrate levels. So now we're going to get into what kind of levels they had. Everybody in the study wore a CGM, so a little continuous glucose monitor. And so there was a greater mean glucose level for the low fat group. On average, it was 94 was their blood sugar. Whereas the people in the low carb group, their average blood sugar was an 81. And then postprandial glucose, which means after eating, was significantly higher with the low fat group. Mean glucose in the 2 hours following the low fat meals was 102. That's the average, as compared to 80.5. So look at this. The low carb group started at 81, and 2 hours postprandial of eating, it was 80.5. In other words, no change. Whereas the people who had the low fat, they saw an increase. Again, predictable. In 15 subjects, we also measured beta hydroxybutyrate. Wait a minute. There was 20 people in the study. Why didn't they do it in all the people? Why just 15 of the people? Now that looks suspicious to me, you guys. So they tested in the overnight fasted state. In other words, they went to bed, woke up in the morning, then tested their ketones, blood ketones. They found that the low carb diet led to an increase in the beta hydroxybutyrate level that surpassed quickly the 0.5 threshold, defining a state of nutritional ketosis. No. Kevin Hall, you are so wrong about this. 0.5 is indeed an indication that you're creating ketones. It does not indicate that you are keto adapted and in a state of nutritional ketosis, as I explained earlier. A 2-week study cannot be conducted telling you anything about a keto adapted, fat adapted person. 2 weeks, the person's just barely getting started eating keto. Do this study over a period of a minimum of 3 months, preferably 6 to 12 months, and come back and tell me how it goes. 2 weeks does not tell you anything. And let's stop pretending like it does. During the second week of the low carb diet, we saw that the average beta hydroxybutyrate levels averaged 1.8, where it remained stable for the duration of the study. Again, you're going to have those higher levels long before you're keto adapted. People get so confused. In ketosis is not keto adapted. In ketosis is the beginning of keto adapted. Be in ketosis, be over 1.0 for 2 weeks in a row, and then let's start talking about you being fat adapted. For most people, that's 2 to 4 weeks. Very insulin resistant people can be upwards of 4 to 8 weeks. 2 weeks as a study period does not get you to that level. So let's stop pretending like it, Kevin Hall. You didn't do anything. You didn't. All right, meal test. During the second week of the diet phase, a liquid meal test was performed in the overnight fasted state. The macronutrient composition of this test meal matched their diet that they were doing. So the low-fat meal compared to the low-carb meal led to significant increases in postprandial glucose for the low-fat group, 101. The low-carb group, it went up to 88. Insulin, oh my gosh. So the insulin in this low-fat group, 48 was their insulin level. The low-carb group, 15. So even in this low-carb group that they said does not have type 2 diabetes, they had a 15 fasted insulin. 15 ain't good. They're trying to pretend like these study participants were all healthy. Well, they're free from diabetes. A 15 blood insulin level, fasting blood insulin level, is not great, which means they had some insulin resistance going on coming into this, which would underscore my point I'm making here that 2 weeks is not nearly long enough to get them keto adapted. So let's not pretend like this study really showed anything. Glucose tolerance, let's take a look at that. At the end of each diet phase, an oral glucose tolerance test, which I've done one of these, where you take this sugar pill, basically, it's just glucose. They test your blood sugar before, and then you take the sugar pill, and then they look at blood sugar, and if it's a OGTT, oral glucose tolerance test with insulin, you see what's happening with insulin. and it's supposed to show how well you tolerate glucose. Well, Kevin Hall knows that when you are well keto adapted and you throw glucose into a well keto adapted eater, it's going to show messed up results as if you're not responding very well. Well, duh. You've shifted your body over from being a sugar burner, which includes glucose, over to being a fat and ketone burner. So if you introduce a big bolus, which is usually like 70 grams worth of glucose, to a keto dieter, it's going to show it whacked. He knows that. And yet he did it anyway. The low carb diet resulted in relative impairment of glucose tolerance compared with the low fat group. Most of the researchers and people in the know say if a low carb dieter is going to do an oral glucose tolerance test, that 3 days leading up to this test, they need to increase their carbohydrates to about 100 grams a day, because your body has to make that shift. Now, once you shift it over those 3 days to get a little bit higher, you're going to show a far different story. But what did he do? He went straight from this very low carb, very high fat diet to whammo bammo giving them this glucose. And it makes it look like, oh, they've got poor glucose tolerance. Oh my gosh. Kevin Hall, you know better. Stop pretending like you're the Wizard of Smarts, trying to prove your little hypothesis when you're dead wrong. And yes, Jimmy Moore is in full-on rant mode today, because this kind of study is what influences people to make bad choices. Very, very bad choices. The average glucose during the glucose tolerance test was 115 with the low-fat diet as compared to 143 in the ketogenic diet. And they think that's a bad thing. Oh my God, oh my gosh. When it's predictable. All right, blood pressure, pulse rate were right about the same, so we're not going to talk about that. Fasting blood measurements, looks like a lot of that is the same as well. They did look at a few of the hormones. So let's get to the discussion part. Our study was designed to measure ad libitum energy intake when inpatient subjects were exposed to widely different food environments with meals and snacks corresponding to either an exemplary plant-based low-fat diet versus an exemplary animal-based ketogenic low-carb diet. The low-fat diet had a much higher glycemic load, resulted in greater postprandial glucose and insulin. So he's trying to say, neener, 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 they had higher blood sugar and insulin, so watch what happens next, you keto people. Energy intake during the low-fat diet was spontaneously reduced by 700 calories compared to the low-carb diet, with subjects losing weight and body fat while reporting no significant differences in hunger, fullness, satisfaction, or pleasantness. These data suggest that while the low-carb diet had benefits for lowering glucose and insulin, it was the low-fat diet that had the best benefits for appetite control. What a bunch of bull. Guarantee you go more than 2 weeks with this study, those low fatties would be going crazy with hunger, cravings. All of us that have been on a low-fat diet over a sustained period of time, we white-knuckled it because, that's right, we were hungry. We had cravings. We couldn't stop eating. So to say, our study found a low-fat diet had great appetite control, I would be like, how in the bleep? Because it just doesn't happen. And in fact, I would say a low-carb diet, once keto adapted. See, here's the flaw in this study. If Kevin Hall really wanted to test this, put them on the diet for 4 weeks. So let's put them on that plant-based low-fat diet for 4 weeks. Then have 2 weeks after that, start the study. And let's see what happens, and vice versa. Put the people on a low-carb ketogenic diet on the diet for 4 weeks, and then start measuring that 5th and 6th week. I guarantee you his results would be extraordinarily different than what he found in this little willy-nilly randomized controlled trial 2-week period with no washout between the diets. He's pretending like this is showing something, and it's really showing nothing. No previous inpatient study has measured ad libitum food intake comparing two diets that restricted target macros to less than 10% of total energy. Therefore, previous studies may not have tested diets that were sufficiently low in this target. This is something that's been a complaint of a lot of the studies is, well, the low-fat diet didn't go low enough. So he did fix that in his study, and the low-carb diet didn't go low enough to show anything. He did fix that. The only problem is he did not go long enough. So good job, Kevin. You're getting there, brother. Work a little harder. Take some of the suggestions we're making here today, and maybe, just maybe, one of these days you'll do a good study. Because up until now, this study is a bunch of bull. It's not telling us anything because a 2-week diet study doesn't really tell you anything at all. It just doesn't. All right, let's see if there's anything else in here. Okay, let's go to the end because I am running out of time and I want to definitely see what you guys have to say. He's repeating a lot of old research that supports his theory, and most of those are not randomized controlled trials. The main limitation of our study is that the inpatient environment makes it difficult to generalize the results to the real world. Well, yeah, if you lock people up in a metabolic ward, it doesn't really translate greatly, but especially for 2 weeks, and then immediately switch them from a low-fat, plant-based diet over quickly to an animal-based, high-fat diet. These study participants were not stupid. They could tell what was going on. Oh, they're trying to compare plants to meat. And again, each of these individuals could have had their own personal bias about those things. This is what makes this so messed up, is there's so many things that could throw a monkey wrench in the results. It's important to emphasize that our study did not examine the effects of diet recommendations for weight loss, which often involve targeting reductions of carbs or fat, along with instructions regarding the types of foods that are to be allowed or avoided. Due to the controlled food environment in our study, the only choice available to the subjects was how much of the foods they got. And that's a problem. If you don't provide foods, let's say the plant-based foods they offered was like quinoa and corn, and you just name the plant-based food that's low fat. What if the person goes, ugh, okay, well, I'll force myself to eat a little bit of this, but they spontaneously drop their calories 700 because gross, yuck, I don't want to eat that crap. Whereas they get over to the mostly meat, animal-based food diet, and they see a big old ribeye steak. Oh yeah, here we go. Or pork belly. Oh my gosh. So that's a part of this as well. And at least he's recognizing that that's a limitation, but dang, it's a big part of the results they got in this study. The subjects were told that this was not a weight loss study. They were instructed not to attempt to lose weight. They were blinded to their body weight measurements. Whether our results would have been different if they were actively trying to lose weight is unknown. Well, if you tell people don't try to lose weight, then they'll go ahead and eat what they're going to eat. But if they think you're trying to lose weight, they probably would have psychologically told themselves, oh, I'm trying to lose weight. Let me eat just enough, but not too much so I don't gain weight, because they might think that eating excess calories would lead to weight gain. And so it's an interesting kind of admission of what the limitations were on this study, but those limitations in and of themselves are shining a bright light on the problem with this study. Those limitations are exactly why they got the results they got. So his conclusion, the passive overconsumption model of obesity, predicts that consuming a diet with high energy, high calories, results in excess energy intake and weight gain. The carbohydrate insulin model of obesity predicts that consuming a diet with high glycemic carbs results in an increased postprandial insulin, which then drives body fat accumulation, thereby increasing your hunger and your calorie needs. While the low-fat diet contained foods with high glycemic load that significantly increased glucose and insulin as compared to the low-carb diet, the low-fat diet led to less energy intake compared with the low-carb diet, which contradicts the predictions of carbohydrate insulin. Well, just because they ate less calories doesn't mean that there weren't bad things going on in their health. This is the other thing too. Kevin Hall You know, sustained periods of elevated insulin, which we told you a while ago was over 45, and elevated blood sugar eventually leads to chronic disease. Insulin resistance is huge. So while today these people might be okay, what are they going to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now? So let's not pretend like that extraordinarily high carb diet, which spontaneously made them eat 700 less calories, is going to, over the long term, be healthy for them. But that's the insinuation that's being made in a study like this. While the low carb diet was high in energy, it did not result in a net body fat gain, which challenges the validity of the passive overconsumption model. So again, he acknowledges, okay, well, I expected that they ate 700 more calories, they would gain weight, and they did not in the low carb group. So that was an interesting finding. Just in the 2 weeks, they found that. But remember, he tried to dismiss it. Oh, it's just water weight. And more than that, I promise you. Our results suggest that the regulation of energy intake and body weight are more complex than these and other simple models. Yeah, no kidding, Kevin Hall. You mean there's other factors besides your diet that can influence your body weight health markers? Who knew? But this is the kind of stuff that's out there, you guys, that we have to deal with. All right, I definitely want to see what you guys have to say. So we're going to go to Instagram here first, then we'll pop over to Facebook, and then finally YouTube Live. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Beth says, fortunately for us, Kevin Hall's belief has no bearing on the efficacy of keto. It does not. And try as he may to fulfill his own theory about obesity and how much he loves the calorie hypothesis and hates the insulin carbohydrate hypothesis, the facts remain that even his own study didn't really show that much in that realm. Cariana says, it feels like some of these researchers aren't interested in the truth. They just have an axe to grind. Well, it's even more than the axe to grind. He's at the NIH. Most of the funding for studies come from the NIH. And so as long as your lab's being funded, you keep doing these studies. And he puts out basically the same friggin' study every time he comes out with a new one. Oh, well, we're confirming my previous result. Oh, we confirmed the results I did in the last 10 studies. Oh, I confirmed. I'm just waiting for the day when his precious little theory isn't confirmed in one of his studies. Does he publish it? Does he have the kahunas to put it out there? I don't know. Beth says the only thing that makes sense for me about this is he's getting paid to say what he's saying. How can somebody know the research and still claim that it's bogus? He's one of them. James says the conclusion, more evidence is needed. James, that is the conclusion that they often come to with studies. It's unfortunate. I mean, obviously give your conclusion, but if your conclusion is, well, we need more research to really confirm this. Well, yeah, no kidding. He also said, I'd toss this study. 2 weeks isn't even enough to get adjusted. Yeah, I said that multiple times during my rant, so thank you for that. Christian Bacon says, hello from Puerto Rico. Glad to hear the commentary about this. You're welcome, because you're going to see it all over the news media. If it's not already out there, it's coming. I think the assumption was that the plants weren't as satisfying, so the people just didn't want to eat it. Exactly. That's what I'm thinking, that you put quinoa and Brussels sprouts and whatever else they put out there, it's just not going to be that desirable for people. So it is what it is. All right, this person asks me the same question every single day. I really need to figure out how to block him because he's annoying. But thank you. Thank you, Instagram. Let's pop over here to Facebook, and then we'll pop over to YouTube when I'm done with Facebook. What's up, you guys? Thanks for being here. I hope this got you fired up. Let's pop you up a little bit so I can see your questions. Dustin says they always try and do this with the studies that are a month or less for an adaptation timeline. It could take upwards of 6 months. Most of the people that I've talked to, keto adaptation takes place within 2 to 4 weeks for most people, and for the especially insulin resistant people, 4 to 8 weeks, and super insulin resistant, up to 3 months. But you're right, it does take a little longer than what the parameters of this study showed. Dustin said, weight loss is where the money is. Weight is the focus as it's what we see. I mean, everyone knows if you're skinny, you've got to be in good shape and healthy. Yeah, they do think that just being skinny automatically makes you healthy. And while I'm not considered skinny by any means, I would dare put my health markers up against most people, would run circles around them. Kim says, I probably ate 700 more calories the first 2 weeks of my keto too. It was awesome to eat that way without guilt. Bacon. Yeah, that's true. Like when you first start on a keto diet and mostly animal-based foods diet, you kind of get that syndrome of, oh my gosh, all the forbidden foods I've never been allowed to have before. Woohoo! So I don't know what these people were eating before they went on this, but think about it. If they come in with their standard American diet or whatever diet they were doing, and suddenly they're being presented with ribeye steaks and pork belly and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, who won't eat more in that initial period? And it could be their bodies telling them, we need that fat, so load us up, okay? And so that could be happening with those people that started with the animal-based diet. Then, as I said in my rant, what about the people who came from that plant-based diet, eating 700 calories less than the others? They come over to the animal-based and they're like, finally, I get to have some foods that look good, taste good, and I want more of. So you're right. We would all be that way. Dustin says, air fryer pork belly is delightful. Any pork belly is delightful, that's for sure. All right, let's take a look at what you guys have to say. Thank you, Facebook, over here on YouTube. I remember about 5 months after I started keto, there was a thing called keto crotch. Yeah, we debunked that one as well. It was actually a big hoax, which I exposed in a Jimmy Rants. I believe I did a whole Jimmy Rants about keto crotch and how there was a PR company that made that whole thing up just to make keto look bad. All right, well, thank you guys for your commentary. And yes, I found him. We are going to hide that gentleman because he does not give up on asking the same question every single day. All right, so what you think, guys? You know, you're going to hear about studies that attempt to disprove the insulin carbohydrate hypothesis, disprove that keeping your body in a state of nutritional ketosis is actually healthy for you, and it's really all about the calories. And that's an incomplete statement. Now, nobody in the keto space is saying gorge yourself on calories. I have been accused of that. Well, you only think it's about keeping the carbs low and you don't control your calories. Therefore, you gorge on calories. You tell people to eat whole sticks of butter, which I've never done. No, you listen to satiety is what you do. And that's what a well-formulated ketogenic diet has to say. Eat food, make it as real whole as possible, make it low carb, moderate protein, high fat, and eat to satiety. And when you do that, you will lose weight, you will get healthy. And of course, even in this study, they admitted weight loss is a little bit of a confounding thing beyond diet because there's so many factors that go into it. Okay? So this is just another in the whole long line of studies trying to discredit it. And I hope, Kevin Hall, that you find this video and you realize what a freaking joke of a researcher you are. Because a lot of the things put in this study, he knows. Like, he's acknowledging almost all the things that we are saying about it, but he's not acknowledging the flaws of his execution in a study. Major flaws. And again, I'm just a layperson. How do I find all these flaws and you still have legitimacy out there in the scientific research world? He definitely does not have this great aura of expertise in this, because if he did, he would not come across like the fool. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, you can engage live in the content, but you got to go follow me right here. Instagram Live is where we go Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, sometimes 5 p.m. during the weekdays, sometimes on the weekend, but always here, 11 a.m. Eastern time on Jimmy Rants on Instagram Live. So go follow me there at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVIN LOWCARBMAN. Once you are there, engage live, and we'd love to see you here. I also put out some good content on my regular page and on my stories, so go check it out, Livin' Low Carb Man on Instagram. Thank you also to my simulcast over here on my Facebook page, as well as on YouTube Live. So thank you guys for joining us today. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay for up to 24 hours on Instagram. After 24 hours, it does disappear. Pop on over to JimmyRants.com. You'll see all the past episodes there. We also, by the way, people have been asking how they can contribute to help this show keep it going. I don't do any sponsors or anything on here, but I put out consistent content. So people are like, hey, we want to help you out. How can we do that? I do have a Patreon page over there at JimmyRants.com if you'd like to contribute. And then we also put the past videos, by the way, up over on YouTube. Type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. So guys, that's it for now. Until next time, we'll see you then. All right. Bada bing, bada boom. Well, thank you guys for being here today. Yes, Dustin, Bio Lane is one of the big calorie apologists out there. He definitely is one of those banging that drum that it's all about the calories, it's not about carbs and blah, blah, blah. So everybody has their position on this. And to me, it's not even arguable. If someone is finding positive results in their weight and their health, carbohydrate restricting and keeping their insulin low and their blood sugar low and their ketone levels high, why would we discourage those people? I don't understand the people that are all about limiting calories. Okay, fine. If that's what you believe and that's what you want to live by, so be it. But at the end of the day, people are seeing results from carbohydrate restrictions and keto diets. Let's not pretend like they don't exist. So, all right, let me pop off of here for now. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Dustin, for that great comment. And we'll see you guys a little bit later on. Bye. Thank you, YouTube. We'll see you later.